After the Allies defeated Germany in World War I, the country felt the punishing economic costs of the Treaty of Versailles, which helped give rise to the Nazi Party. To stoke extreme nationalism, one tactic the country's leaders deployed was stimulating interest in the prehistory of Germany. The Nazis formed the Ahnenerbe organization to be its instrument for Nazi archaeology and archaeological propaganda. They rolled smaller existing organizations into the Ahnenerbe and placed SS Chief Heinrich Himmler at its head. The Ahnenerbe sponsored projects all over the world, from Bolivia to the Middle East, pursuing evidence of German superiority and occult powers that would solidify their ascendant military strength. As a part of their interest in prehistory, the Nazis reportedly sent an archaeology team to Turkey to search for Noah's Ark on Mount Ararat in the 1930s. The search for Noah's Ark on this mountain was not a random choice. The book of Genesis, chapter 8, verse 4 describes, quote, "The ark rested in the 7th month on the 17th day of the mount up on the mountains of Ararat," end quote. Mount Ararat has been the target for dozens of expeditions seeking Noah's Ark. The first recorded ascent of Ararat for this purpose was led by Frederick Parrott in 1829. In his description of the trip, Parrott wrote, quote, "All the Armenians are firmly persuaded that Noah's Ark remains to this very day on the top of Ararat, and that, in order to preserve it, no human being is allowed to approach it," end quote. Today, Mount Ararat is known in Turkish as Agri Dağ, the Mountain of Pain. It is Turkey's highest mountain and positioned on the border with Iran and Armenia. Today's episode isn't about the expeditions to find the Ark. Instead, we're going to talk about something else the Germans supposedly found. When the Germans arrived to start their archaeology work, they heard an odd story from a local Turkish man. He shared a legend about an event that occurred 200 years earlier and kept a secret. He told the Germans about the day a bright metal house fell from the sky. Now I'll pause the story to make an observation, as I love this description of the object. I learned about it from famed Turkish UFO researcher Farah Yurdozu while in Istanbul during my recent My Dark Path research trip. As to be expected, I could find no substantiation other than a few references online. I've even asked a few native speakers to Google references in Turkish, and they've found nothing helpful so far. But even if this story is just that, a story, the description is marvelous. How else would a person in the Turkish countryside in the early 1700s describe a flying saucer, but as a metal house? The Turkish man elaborated to the Germans, recounting that on the day that the bright metal house fell to the earth, it was hot and emitted a continuous whistling sound. The Germans were obviously excited, knowing what this discovery might mean. So they had the man escort them to the location of the object. It remained in the exact spot where it had landed 2 centuries earlier. The story continues, noting that Nazi researchers found the object was disc-shaped and about 80 feet in diameter and 20 feet high at the center. The archaeology team allegedly sent for another team from Germany to recover the craft and study it in secret in their homeland. Now, in the spectrum of evidence-based UFO encounters, I'll definitely put this in the I want to believe category, rather than one that has a reasonable chance of being true. If it were true, the event would seem to be of such consequence that it would have been backed up by other corroborating evidence. But that's okay. To search for the truth effectively requires that we discern which UFO and UAP sightings could actually be of alien origin and which ones can be dismissed. But think about this unnamed man from Mount Ararat, if he existed. He was in a tough spot. The Germans, their power in Europe was rising, and no doubt they were acting accordingly. They would have expected the truth from this man. But if the man from Mount Ararat was being untruthful, his story would have unraveled quickly, and his lie would have cost him his reputation and potentially even his life. But the story highlights a unique connection between UFOs and Turkey. Today, I'll share the story of another Turkish man, and this modern Turk we know by the name of Murat Yalcin Yalman. Yalman, like his supposed fellow countrymen did decades earlier, claimed to have seen a UFO. But in Yalman's case, he had incredible video evidence that was shared broadly in the late 2010s, and the topic continues to be hotly debated today. A famous Turkish UFOologist, Haktan Akdogan, commented in 2015 that, quote,
UFOs have been in touch with human beings for ages. Besides the photographs and videos, there have been many UFO sightings in Turkish airspace witnessed by Turkish pilots. I can say that Turkey is one of the top 5 UFO hotspots in the world.
End quote. So the thinly sourced event from the 1930s and this metal house was not just a random sighting in Turkey's history. Instead, it's an example of the country's rich history of UFO sightings. And if potential alien visitors were picking a geography or even picking a city that represented a broad arc of human history and experience, Istanbul, Turkey's capital, would certainly be at the top of the aliens list. Istanbul is a city that bridges time, continents, religions, and empires. The city's founding came around the year 667 BC when Greek ships entered the Bosphorus Strait, a narrow waterway that was famous for crushing the hulls of vessels against rocky cliffs. A few miles past the strait, they sailed west and into a natural harbor with calm waters. They would have disembarked and hiked a hill at the tip of the peninsula. To the south, they would have looked into the Sea of Marmara, through which they'd sailed from their homeland. To the north, they would have seen rich forests and the continuation of the Bosphorus Strait, leading further into the unknown. And then, looking east, they would have seen the rolling hills of an entirely different continent, Asia. And so these Greek settlers would have unpacked their ships and started their new colony in this new land. And as I write this, I'm looking out over the same peninsula, the very western tip of the European continent, and just across the water, the eastern tip of the Asian continent. The darkness must have completely shrouded that Greek settlement on their very first night in the new land. But today, in the same location, a city more than 2 millennia old unfolds before me. On the Asian side, skyscrapers sparkle in the nighttime sky, including the iconic Kamilika Tower, which was dedicated in 2021, making it the tallest building in the country. On the European peninsula, I see at least 5 mosques, each majestically lit in the night. Formerly known as both Byzantium and Constantinople, Istanbul has been a strategic and cultural center throughout its existence, witnessing the rise and fall of empires, the clash of civilizations, and the blending of diverse cultures. And in 2007, one of the citizens of Istanbul, Murat Yalcin Yalman, was working at the holiday village of Kumburgaz as a night watchman. This oceanfront town is about 30 miles west of Istanbul along the coast. He lived and worked in anonymity, and his name might have gone unnoticed in the news until something happened. Yalman's work watching over the vacation homes at night gave him a perfect view of the ocean, and from this vantage point he started seeing odd lights in the sky over the water. And after seeing these objects on multiple evenings, he finally bought a video camera and started shooting. He took his first video in 2007 on June 20th, and the final video from that year was shot on August 31st. Now, UFOs were not an unknown phenomenon to Yalman. While fishing with his father as a child, 3 unknown objects had hovered over them. But over this 3-month period in 2007, Yalman used his Canon video camera to record a series of round and oval-shaped craft maneuvering over the ocean, always between midnight and 6 a.m. And in an interview conducted in 2009 at the oceanfront location where he took the video, Yalman noted that he saw these objects every 2 or 3 weeks and at most 2 nights in a row. He said, quote, "I think it's important to know the universe is filled with much smarter lives and not only limited to this planet. This opportunity to capture the video luckily presented itself, and so I made the decision to keep shooting." End quote. In the series of videos taken over 3 years, several types of objects were captured. All appear round or oval with a metallic structure. Akdogan, who also appears alongside Yalman in most of his public appearances, noted something extraordinary. describing that the video captures images of, quote, beings who are inside the object. In the end, this is one of the most extraordinary cases of all time, end quote. That's right, not only are the images of the UFOs extraordinary, but several show humanoid figures moving within the object. Now, if you're driving or otherwise can't look at the video, the objects have the shape that we've come to expect of a UFO. Disc-shaped with a thicker center tapering to a thinner edge. And if you're familiar with the show Battlestar Galactica, the images have the distinctly arched look of a Cylon Raider. In addition to their metallic appearance, they flew without sound and sometimes were accompanied by strange red and orange lights. Now, Akdogan goes on to describe the analysis of these figures, quote,
"We are under the impression that the two silhouettes belong to extraterrestrials, and there is a great possibility our friends agree with us on the issue. When we compare the heights of the extraterrestrial silhouettes and the structure of their heads to the object. According to our estimation, the ship is about 10 to 12 meters wide in diameter."
Now, that's a diameter of about 33 to 40 feet. Now, initially, I thought that I'd cover the Kumburgaz sightings alongside several others in this episode. However, I found the video to be so compelling and the potential explanations are so intriguing that I've moved the other UFO and close encounter stories to another Secrets of Istanbul episode. So, before we dive into the arguments for and against these videos, I think it's worth sharing some additional background. First, the movies were captured from land looking out over the Sea of Marmara. The distance from Kumburgaz, where the videos were shot, directly south to the opposite shore of the sea, is about 46 miles. The shoreline to the southeast is similarly about 50 miles, and to the southwest, a large island called Marmara Island is a similar distance. In another interview with Akdogan and Yalman, they described the location where the video was shot.
"The residential area is right behind the Yeniket residential site and is near the beach above the sea. In other words, the horizon follows right behind and the area is clear. There is no mountain or a residential area that could be recorded. And because he was focused directly on the object, Mr. Yalman did not feel it necessary to shoot the surroundings that was behind him, because he did not want to run out of batteries either. We did check the configuration of the sky and the moon was there and the moonlight was strong at the time of the recording. And therefore, the source of the light comes from the moon, which reflected its light to the object's surface. The light for the video has a source, and that is the moon. The reflection on the object is from the light that comes from the moon."
Also of note is the presence of other witnesses. About 20 witnesses observed the disc and oval-shaped objects. Some of the witnesses lived nearby. Others were curious onlookers and fishermen. In a 2009 interview with some of these witnesses, one said, quote, "I don't agree with what the skeptics say because I know that I saw them with my own two eyes," end quote. Another witness present with Yalman said in the same interview, quote, "I saw a very intense, extremely bright light. It stayed there in the sky. By the way it moved, I think this definitely goes against the laws of gravity. And after staying there for a while, it started to grow bigger like this, and suddenly it disappeared," end quote. Now, one of the witnesses was not a local, but Dr. Roger Lair, a podiatric surgeon who became a UFOologist later in life. He recounted his experience saying, quote, "It's a close-up of a craft so close you can see the occupants. It's 100% real, and I was there as it was filmed. We were on the beach and filming out over the water. And we saw something bright that was under the moon. And if the moon were the size of a dime, this was the size of a flashlight. As the camera focused on the craft, those were the shots that became famous," end quote.
If this is the video, which is called the Kumburgaz video, which is a close-up of a craft, in fact so close that you can see the occupants, it is 100% real, and I was there as that was filmed.
Now, as you'll learn, more than the footage would become famous. Thank you for watching this episode of My Dark Path. If you'd like to support the channel more, please consider joining My Dark Path Plus on Patreon, where you'll receive exclusive episodes plus great swag like t-shirts and books, all for a small donation of $5 a month. But no matter how you choose to support the channel, know I'm grateful for your support. Until next time, good night.